In this video, I want to talk about communism in China. I know it's a serious topic. It's a little different from my previous videos where I mostly talked about how to live in China, things to know about China, and how to make things easier for yourself when you're in China, that kind of thing. But now I want to talk about communism in China or socialism in China for a couple reasons. One thing is that China has been in the news a lot these days for the Communist Party doing all kinds of different things. Actually, China's been in the news for many years. But also, I've heard this thing where people want socialism in America, and they have pictures of Mao Zedong and that kind of thing. And I think they don't really know what they are asking for and what they are doing when they are putting up pictures of Mao Zedong and wanting that kind of lifestyle in America. So let me share a little bit about the history of communism in China, not from books, maybe a little bit, but from things that I heard from people there in China, people who grew up under Mao Zedong and that kind of thing. And also share a little bit about how the Communist Party in China was operating when I was there, and a little bit about now as well. Since I am no longer in China, I came back to America in 2016. I lived in China for 3.5 years, from 2012 to 2016. And so let's get started with this. So a couple things to share. Under Mao Zedong, the communism or socialism, however you want to look at it, was in its purest form, you could say. Nowadays, it's not so much in its purest form because you have a lot more foreigners there. You have more capitalism in a way because you have people able to start their own businesses to a certain extent, and that kind of thing. You have trade from international trade going on. You have foreigners studying in universities there. You do have some foreign universities themselves there as well. And you do have some international elementary, middle, and high school schools there. So in that sense, it's different from Mao Zedong in his time. It's not communism in its purest form. Now, under Mao Zedong, you had to be poor. You had to be. Or you would be either beaten, killed, or they would take your things away. Everyone had to be equally poor. And that was the thing with communism at the time. So a lot of people were saying they want communism to make things equal for everybody, right? The problem is, if you look at under Mao Zedong, it was equal for everybody except for the government, who had everything, and they lived very comfortably. But the ordinary person, everybody was equally poor. And I'll give you a few examples from people. I know someone, their parents and grandparents grew up under Mao Zedong. They had to go to a communal place where they would eat food, and it was barely anything. They had to go around looking for extra food or stealing food from the government because they just didn't have enough. It was barely any. They had to eat in a communal area. A communal area. So I don't think you would want to eat in a communal area where the government would provide food for you. To me, that doesn't sound like a good way to eat. You would want to choose the food that you would want to eat, right? And it was the same for the schools. The schools at the time were very poor, and I have this confirmed information. I know someone whose grandfather was the head of a school, and they were having a meeting, and the children were not getting enough food at all. And in the meeting, he said, one steamed bun is not enough for the children. One steamed bun per day is not enough for each child. And there was someone who heard what was said and ratted him out, told the government. The government came, they sent people, and he was tortured to death. And that's a confirmed story. Multiple sources, multiple people from that story. So that's another example. I'll share another example. When I was there, one of the coworkers I had, a teacher who we taught in the same school together there, and I asked him, "So why'd you get into teaching?" And he said, "Well, we didn't have a choice. The government chose our jobs for us." I said, "Oh, okay." Now I know that not everyone has their job chosen for them by the government, but according to him, he and some others, the government chose their job for them. They didn't have a choice. So, I mean, you can imagine in your life, would you want the government to decide what kind of job you work? I don't think most people would want that. And so those are a few stories. There are many others. Now, if you go to a museum in China, I went to the Shanghai Museum. It's the, I guess you could say, number one museum of Chinese history in Shanghai. There's very few things there, not much at all inside the museum. And I was shocked when that was the case, because China is a land that's thousands and thousands of years old, one of the oldest civilizations, you could say, well over 5,000 years old. And I was shocked at how few things were there. And I was told by someone, Chinese person, during the Cultural Revolution, they destroyed all the traditional Chinese things. They thought the things from the past were bad, and so they just wanted to destroy everything that represented China from the past. So that's one of the reasons why there is so little left of the ancient China compared with what there should be. And that reminds me of another story that I think I should share, because for Mao Zedong and his army, they would kill landlords and take all of their stuff. They saw landlords as being evil. And it didn't matter how, even if you were a good landlord, you just owned a piece of property. Maybe you paid people to work on the land, or maybe not. Maybe you just had the land for yourself and for your family. You would be killed and the land taken from you. So there was a story of someone who, they got word that Mao Zedong's army was coming through their land. So what they did was they got rid of all of their things. They hid it, or they destroyed it, or they gave it away. And they made themselves look as poor as possible. And they had to do that, otherwise Mao Zedong's army would kill them. So that's why they had to get rid of absolutely everything they had. And that's another interesting thing. I don't know why these people. I can understand why the Chinese government would have pictures of Mao on the money, or a picture of Mao in Tiananmen Square. Is because he's the head of the Communist Party. The Chinese government is communist, and I could understand why they would have it. But why would people in America have pictures of Mao Zedong based on all these things that I'm sharing? Now, some people might say, well, the Americans have done a lot of bad things, and that's 100% true. I want to ask, when has this sort of thing happened that I'm sharing with you now? Yes, the Native Americans, they suffered a lot under certain presidents. It's not every American that did that to the Native Americans. There were certain groups of Americans, certain presidents especially. You can look up the history, Andrew Jackson and others, that were especially cruel to the Native Americans. And there were also Native Americans that were extremely cruel toward the Europeans who came to this land as well, which is, it's not justified that the peaceful ones get slaughtered, of course. But I'm talking about Mao Zedong and communism. Why would people be so much in favor of those things based on what I'm sharing with you? And so, getting now more into the modern age of communism in China, I want to talk about the pollution. The pollution is not just a random thing that's happening in China. And let me speak about the pollution. Why is there so much pollution in China? I was there one time in Jining, which is in Shandong province. The sun was blocked by brownness. The whole sky was brown. The sun was blocked. You could barely see it coming through, and it wasn't blocked by clouds. And we asked the taxi driver, how often is it like this? How often is the sky like this? And he said about 7 out of 10 days is like this. Okay. When we were in the hotel, we opened up the windows, and the cleaning person said to us, keep the windows closed. You don't want the dust flying into the room. I'm like, okay. And when you're just walking around on the street there, you start to feel the dust get into your throat. So people are wondering, what's the pollution from in China? Oh, it's from all the cars and all the people. That's not true at all. You don't get dust in the air from cars. You don't get PMI in the air from cars and from just people. The dust is there from a few things. Number one is the construction. There is just an astronomical amount of construction, and when they do it, the dust spews into the air. They don't control the dust at all. They don't put water down or anything like that to prevent the dust from flying up. Even just basic construction things, there's dust flying everywhere, and they just don't care that there's dust flying everywhere. Another thing is the mining, coal mining, and other types of mining, and then the factories. The safety procedures that they have are not followed whatsoever. And so a lot of these construction projects are done by the government, and they know that this is the pollution is the result of it, and they just don't care. The reason is that they put money first, they put technology first, and they put advancement first over safety. And so the pollution affects everybody in China. More than 90% of the people, unless you live in Tibet or Hainan, which is the island all the way south. Those places are not really affected so much. But everywhere else is highly affected by the pollution. And it's the government that's doing it. And also it's the government that's allowing it. Now, the thing is, in China, for communism, there is no public protest allowed. It's illegal to protest publicly, which is why you'll never see anyone doing it. Also, as you probably know, firearms are illegal. Guns are illegal for common citizens. Pepper spray is illegal. Any kind of self-defense tool like that is illegal. So if you do decide to protest publicly, they will beat you and or put you in jail, and you can't do anything about it. Even if the government is actively killing people unjustly, you can't do anything about it because they have all the weapons, they have the military, the police, and you can't do anything about it. So that's another thing with communism is the government decides everything for you, pretty much. The for social media, YouTube is banned, Facebook is banned, Twitter is banned, Google is banned, and many other things. If you post, and this happened to me many times, if you post an article on Chinese social media, such as WeChat, and it's an article that speaks out against the Chinese government or in favor of Christianity or something like that, they will remove that article. And when you click the link, it says it cannot be accessed. So for social media, they are monitoring it heavily, and it's censored heavily, and people don't have access to a lot of information that in America we take for granted. There is no freedom of speech, at least the way we have it in America. So if you decide to speak out in any way against the government, point out what they're doing is wrong, then you will be persecuted for that. And you can just look at Tiananmen Square, how that happened. There are many people who were murdered, thrown into a river, their body was found, and that sort of thing. It happens all the time. So now getting to religion, I mentioned in the previous video about the Bibles being burned. That's confirmed. It's not just news. I have that confirmed. That the police came to the village and they forced everyone to come throw their Bible into the fire. So that's confirmed. That's happening there. And even before that happened, I have confirmed that the police are monitoring the churches. They're not letting children go to the churches. They're trying to stop, because, obviously the adults who have been going to church, they've already been formed in their beliefs. And even if the government says, okay, you cannot go to church anymore, they're not going to stop believing, right? So, but for the children, they're not allowing the children to go to church because they don't want them to get exposed to church and to Christianity, because it will form their mind. They're young, but if they don't go and they don't hear about it, if they don't have any Bibles or prayers or anything like that, they're not going to be exposed to it, and then they're not going to believe it. They'll grow up in the Chinese communist system, which is atheist. If you work for the government in China, you are required to profess atheism, that you believe that there is no God. Now, I have it confirmed from government officials. Well, one government official said, and others I've heard as well from second-hand sources, that even though some government officials will profess atheism because it's their job, maybe they work for the government and it's their job, they have to do that, but in secret at home, maybe they have a Bible, maybe they pray, and that sort of thing. So by definition, the Chinese government is atheist, and you have to profess that. So it's not really surprising what's going on with this, with all the things with the churches and the Bibles being burned. the decrossing, which started when I was there. They removed thousands of crosses from churches in Zhejiang province and other areas. The crosses were being removed from the tops of churches, and there were pictures that I saw of uh, people getting beaten up. They're trying to defend the cross, and they can't even defend themselves from that happening. I had a priest there who said that he was afraid to leave the church. He thought that the police would show up and take the cross off the church. Also, when I was there was a bishop who was limited. He was forced, he could not leave where he was. The government restricted where he could go. He was limited to a very small area. I had that confirmed from multiple sources. And also for pilgrimages, that was another thing that became illegal. It was legal when I first got to China, and then later on, around 2015, 2016, it became illegal to go on a pilgrimage if you were in the church. And there was one priest who had this confirmed. He was going on a pilgrimage. He didn't really publicize it very much, but he had a group of people he was going on a pilgrimage with, and he talked about it on the phone with somebody, whatever. And then on the day of the pilgrimage, the police showed up at his church and said, "Are you going on a pilgrimage?" And he said, "Yes." He said, "You cannot go. None of you can go." And so he said that he believed that his phone was wiretapped, because that would be the only way that the police could find out that he was going on this pilgrimage. So his phone was wiretapped, and he wasn't allowed to go on a pilgrimage. I mean, can you imagine in the U.S. if you were not allowed to go on a pilgrimage to some place, to some mountain or to some church or to some holy site or to a river or a forest or a building or some place, a pilgrimage as an act of faith, and you're not allowed to go. So that happened there. Also, the abortions, the one-child policy, which when I was there, it became the two-child policy, which meant that couples were now allowed to have two children. But before that time, if you had more than one child, you would receive a very heavy fine, and you may also be forced to have an abortion. They may force to kill the, and even if the baby was born, they might kill the baby. So you can imagine that. Terrible. Also, under the Chinese communist system, for owning land or owning your apartment, nowadays you are allowed to buy your own home or apartment or land. However, you're technically leasing it from the government. You have it for 70 years, and then you have to buy it again. So, I mean, you could say, yeah, 70 years is a lot. Yes, it's a lot, but I mean, you can imagine if you want to pass it down to your children or grandchildren, you can't. Well, you can do that, but then you would have to buy it again after 70 years. So you technically are leasing your property from the government. You don't own it. And I've heard that might change, but as of now, that's the way it is. So that's kind of an introduction to the some of the horrors of the communist system going on in China. I think everything that I share with you, I have confirmed firsthand, hearing it from with my ears from people over there while I was there and also now. And so I strongly recommend, if you think that that communism is the way to go, I would strongly recommend that you reconsider your thoughts. Um, I wouldn't even be allowed to say what I'm saying now if I were there. Um, if I want to speak out in America against really anything, if I want to speak out against democracy, if I want to speak out against a politician, if I want to speak out against a party, a certain political party, I can do that and I'm not going to get arrested. It's not against the law. But in China, it is against the law, and you will get arrested for that. So I hope people reconsider their thoughts on communism, and I hope this sheds some light on the situation. Now, I love China very much. China is a great land. They're great people. I just don't think that this government system that they have set up there is a good one. I think it's a bad one, to be honest. So, hope this helps. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment down in the description below, under the description below. I'll be happy to answer them. Feel free to check out my other videos about China if you are going there. They are very helpful. I think my videos on China are the best to help you prepare to go to China. So please check them out and feel free to subscribe. And we'll see you again soon.